Hello, welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name is Brian, and for this episode, we are going to be talking about some titles coming out from Kino Lorber in the month of October. And there is a little bit of horror stuff here, but there's actually quite a variety of things. So let me get into this. I'll start with the horror-y stuff. We have 3 TV movies, and they are all interesting. This is by far my favorite of the 3. The Victim, starring, as you can see, Elizabeth Montgomery. This is from 1972, and also stars George Maharis, as mentioned by Rick Dalton in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as one of the 3 Georges. I had never seen this. This is pretty great, I gotta say. It is about a woman played by Elizabeth Montgomery, of course, of Bewitched fame, who calls to check on her younger sister, who is married and lives in a remote, large house. And she gets a hold of her, only to find out from her sister that she is ending her marriage after, I guess, a struggled period, and that she is going to divorce her husband and try and get it to be as if there was never a marriage. And so the trick is, and I'm not going to spoil too much here, but what we do see is while she's having that conversation, there seems to be somebody creepily watching her and overhearing her talk of the divorce, which apparently was just settled the night previous. And Elizabeth Montgomery's character says, "Oh, I want to come out and see you." She's like, "No, don't bother. You know, he'll get his stuff out, and it's no big deal. You don't have to come and see me." But she decides to go anyway. And what we do see, the last shot before she leaves to go visit her sister, is after she gets off the phone, somebody comes into the room, and she has a surprised look on her face, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And it's clearly somebody she knows. And that is the last we see of her for a little while. So there's sort of a mystery set up there. And Elizabeth Montgomery decides to drive out to see her sister anyway, because she's just a little nervous that something's happened. She calls a little bit after that fateful meeting, and the phone is off the hook. And we see a shot of the room all messed up. And then a little while later, when she calls, the phone rings now, and the room has been completely cleaned up, and we don't have any idea what happened or who did it or what's going on. So Elizabeth Montgomery gets out to the old house and starts sort of poking around and runs into the old housekeeper, who's kind of grumpy and suspicious, and it kind of goes from there. And I don't really want to give away too much more than that setup, because that's really all I think you need. But it's, kind of a proto-slasher. It's preceding even Black Christmas, and there is definitely a Friday the 13th maybe energy to it. And I totally dug this. Like, I love the build of it, and I love the performances. I thought Elizabeth Montgomery, and it's a lot of her, did a really nice job, and just totally dug this. This is like a new discovery for me, something I really recommend highly. This comes with a lovely audio commentary from the great Amanda Reyes, who wrote the book Are You in the House Alone?, which is a compendium of TV movies. I always recommend that book, and she is an expert on TV movies, one of the great experts. This does not have reversible artwork, but I do like the artwork they've commissioned for it, and it looks great. That's one of the nice things about Kino doing these TV movies, is they seem to be getting good new masters, and this is a brand new HD master. It is 4:3, of course, because it's a TV movie, but it looks wonderful, and I absolutely dug that. So that's going to be my highest recommendation for this whole group. And then continuing with the TV movies, we have one called Scream Pretty Peggy, as you can see, starring Bette Davis, although she is a smaller part of this movie. Peggy in question is played by Sian Barbara Allen, who you can see there in the middle. And this is another, all 3 of these movies are kind of about women who live in slightly creepy old houses, big old houses. So this is another one where we have a college girl, again, the Peggy character, who decides to take a job. We see a creepy incident out at the house I'm not going to go into. And that's where Bette Davis's character lives. And then we see this girl, Peggy, taking a job as a caretaker at the house. She bikes over there. She meets Bette Davis's son, who is a sculptor, who this girl actually knows. She's an art student, and she is interested in all manner of art. And I think that was part of the draw for her, is, you know, working for this guy who is a sculptor she respects. And slowly we begin to unravel sort of the mystery of what's going on at this house. There is a sister character that has gone away, and there's just some weird stuff happening in this house. And Bette Davis's character seems like the grumpy old mother, but also maybe is trying to speak some sense to this girl and telling her, don't take this job, get out of this house. I'm just telling you now, you know. And it's just a slow burn, slow reveal. It reminds me of a couple different movies, which I'm not going to call out in this description because those are kind of spoilery, and I just don't want to give that away, although you can kind of maybe see where it's going. And you'll definitely pick up on a couple of the movies once you get to the end. But this is another brand new HD master. Looks great. This has commentary by Troy Horwath and Nathaniel Thompson, directed by Gordon Hessler, who did the Oblong Box, Scream and Scream Again, but he also did Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, which I just rewatched today, actually. And I would love a nice release of, but I doubt that'll ever happen. I think that's just not in the cards. But anyway, not to get carried away, just another TV movie that Gordon Hessler did. But this was good. Not as good as Victim, but, you know, solid, and not enough Bette Davis, as far as I'm concerned, but still enjoyable and interesting, as slightly annoying as the Peggy character is in this movie, and she is a little bit. But I definitely dug that. That was worthwhile. I think my least favorite of the three, but still interesting, is The Screaming Woman, which is based on a short story by Ray Bradbury, as you can see there, directed by Jack Smite, who did a lot of TV and TV movies, and interesting director, certainly. As you can see, it stars Olivia de Havilland, also features Joseph Cotten and Walter Pidgeon, and basically, we have an older woman played by Olivia de Havilland who's returning from a stay in a mental asylum or some kind of mental institute where she was being treated for being a little crazy, I guess. And one of the first, I guess it's the first week back at this big old house, she takes a ride in her horse-driven carriage, very antiquated, out into the woods, and then suddenly encounters this section of ground, which apparently we found out used to be an old smokehouse, and it had a basement. And she hears this woman screaming for help. Help me, get me. And we see through some camera shots that there's a woman buried in the ground, and she's still alive. And there's a crack in the ground where she can yell out and can be heard. And so this, you know, old woman with a history of craziness runs back to her house to tell her son and his very unpleasant wife about this incident, and then, of course, nobody believes her. And I think the thing I found a little bit frustrating about this movie is that then she spends a good portion of the movie sort of running around trying to get people to help her dig in the back area, and she can't do it herself. She's got arthritis, and she tries to get a kid to help her. She tries to get a neighbor, and eventually we find out what the deal is. In terms of, actually pretty early, we find out that a guy has buried his wife there, and then she sort of bumps into that guy, and it gets a little frustrating ultimately, that you're just like, somebody please believe her. I know she's got this history, but like, for whatever reason, the woman won't scream when anyone else is around. So that's a bit perplexing, but a good performance by Olivia de Havilland, and Joseph Cotten and Walter Pidgeon have smaller roles, but I enjoyed both of them. But yeah, an interesting story. I want to read the story. I'm sure the story I might enjoy a little bit better than this, but nonetheless, a great looking, brand new HD master, and a very interesting TV movie. Then we have some Westerns. We have a couple Westerns from Robert Aldrich. This is my favorite of the two, Veracruz, with Gary Cooper and Burt Lancaster. And this is set during the I want to say that, let's see here, if it tells the time period. Two daredevil mercenaries who journey to Mexico in search of adventure and cold hard cash during the 1866 Mexican Revolution. So there are revolutionaries and there's sort of the powers that be in Mexico at this time, and they are looking for mercenaries to help. And so these two characters just sort of happen to run into each other by happenstance and then are pursued by the Mexican army, and they end up sort of joining forces, and it's a really fun sort of buddy movie, and it's a very enjoyable performance by both Cooper and Lancaster in particular is really chewing it up, like very charismatic but evil outlaw type, a guy who is not averse to killing children. Like that's something that comes up early when he's surrounded. He gets his men to grab some kids and hold them hostage so that he can get out. I mean, that's the kind of guy we're dealing with here. And he plays it really pitch perfectly. And I won't go too far into the plot, but it's just sort of becomes this like buddy adventure, action Western. And they are just really great together. And the supporting cast includes like Ernest Borgnine and Jack Elam, and oh man, there's a bunch more folks you'd recognize in this that I totally got a kick out of. This has a really cool commentary by filmmaker Alex Cox, and I've talked before about him on the channel and how he has a great affinity for Westerns and has done many commentaries for Kino Lorber. I highly recommend looking into their spaghetti Westerns, especially, every other spaghetti Western they've put out has a commentary by him on it. And I always find his commentaries enjoyable. So that is really solid stuff. But yeah, this is a really good Western. Here's the alternate artwork there. A nice widescreen transfer. 94-minute movie. I like a good lean and mean kind of Western. So that one's very solid. And then this one is interesting as well. The Last Sunset with Rock Hudson and Kirk Douglas, as well as you can see Dorothy Malone, Joseph Cotten again, Carol Lindley, and Neville Brand. And this one, this is a brand new 2K master. Veracruz, I don't know that that's a new master. It's a Technicolor film. It looks good, but I don't think the master is sparkling and new. This transfer looks a little better. This, of course, Robert Aldrich, for those that don't know, directed things like The Dirty Dozen. They mentioned The Grissom Gang and Alzana's Raid. Alzana's Raid, another Burt Lancaster Western I'm a big fan of that they put out on Blu-ray, which I do recommend for sure. But this one, it says, epic Western melodrama starring Rock Hudson with Kirk Douglas, Dorothy Malone, Joseph Cotten, blah, blah, blah. Western justice takes a turn in The Last Sunset as American lawman Dana Stribling, Hudson, enters Mexico with one mission: to hunt down the infamous Brendan O'Malley, that's Kirk Douglas, who killed his brother-in-law. He finds his culprit working from a very wealthy cattleman, Joseph Cotten, and arranging a herd to cross the border. Unable to serve his warrant, Stribling signs on as a trail boss, warning O'Malley of his intentions once they reach Texas. So it's an interesting, pursued and pursuer kind of scenario where they're in almost like a timeout, for a period because they're doing this cattle drive. So it's almost like two movies, It's both the revenge tale and the catching the bad guy tale and this cattle drive. And the Kirk Douglas character, again, very charismatic and charming, in his way. And he does a very nice job of this, and I totally dug this. And this one's written by Dalton Trumbo, who, of course, Kirk Douglas was a big fan of. He used him for Spartacus. Lonely Are the Brave is another one that comes to mind. I mean, he definitely was a fan of Dalton Trumbo and championed him. But a very enjoyable Western, again, from Robert Aldrich also. Then we have a couple from Code Red here. And this is the Hound of the Baskervilles. No, not the original, Sherlock Holmes story, nor the Hammer films reworking. This is the Peter Cook and Dudley Moore comedic version, and it's directed by Paul Morrissey, who of course did, I believe, the Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula, which are getting releases this year in 4K. And this is nothing like those films at all. This is a goofy comedy. Of course, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore were a great comedy team, a British comedy team. And they made some other movies that are also equally interesting, but I really enjoy them as a comic duo, especially Dudley Moore, I think, is quite funny. He also did the music for this film, I noticed, which is kind of neat. But yeah, this is just a comedic take on Hound of the Baskervilles, the mystery of this, manor that the, the head patriarch of each generation is killed by a hound or something. And anyway, it's just goofiness, and it's very silly, and my expectations were very low for this, but I was actually surprised that I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It was legitimately goofy funny in parts that, I found amusing. So if you're also looking for other Peter Cook, Dudley Moore comedies, this one is out of print, unfortunately, but a very great take on Faust, Bedazzled, a cult film from the 60s. This one is from 1978, so a bit later. But I very much love Bedazzled. I think that's an even funnier, well, certainly funnier than this, but for whatever reason, I hadn't even realized that they had done this. So it was kind of neat to see this. And it looks good. It doesn't have any features, just the trailer, but nonetheless, an enjoyable comedy. Might go well with something like The Private Eyes with Don Knotts and Tim Conway, a movie I've been meaning to talk about on the channel, and is a very goofy private eye film that I just think these two together would be a lot of fun. That just occurred to me while I was watching it. Next up from Code Red, we have half of Fritz the Cat double thing that's happening, basically. What I mean is, this is 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, which of course is the follow-up to the original Fritz the Cat, which is also getting a Blu-ray release from Code Red in October. I don't have that one yet, but I will definitely talk about it when I do. I had totally forgotten sort of this film, and it is definitely interesting. It's of its time. It is definitely not afraid to offend. It opens with Fritz laying on his couch, smoking a joint, and talking to his wife, who is sort of yelling at him about how useless he is, and he sort of starts to zone out, and part of him floats away, and that part of him leaves the house and then sort of becomes like a, looking back on his past, but it's also just like this weird metaphysical trip, and there's lots of psychedelic, extended sequences of just bizarre, crazy, cartoony stuff. He's hanging out with Nazis. He's remembering, other stuff from his past. There's definitely, like I said, sort of a political bent to it in some ways, a countercultural influence, if you will. But the animation is very much that Ralph Bakshi sort of rip-off style, that I find interesting. And just as an animation fan of films from this period, especially, weirdly, the R-rated animated films. Of course, Fritz the Cat was rated X when it came out. This is rated R, and it's definitely a hard R, not for kids at all. There's, sex and drug use and profanity and, like I said, lots of, ostensibly offensive things maybe, but it is certainly an interesting curio of the period. And it'll be nice to have both Fritz films on Blu-ray. This looks great, by the way. This transfer looks really lovely. The colors absolutely pop. And so on that level, I was very happy with this release. Again, no special features for this one, but nonetheless worth grabbing if you're a fan of that kind of animation. Then we have a couple, I guess, comedies. This one definitely. I don't know about the next one as much, but Come September, a screwball farce starring Rock Hudson and Gina Lollobrigida. This one I had heard of, but I'd never seen, directed by Robert Mulligan, who did things like Love with a Proper Stranger. I think that's my favorite, and that's also a Kino release. That's less of a comedy, more of a character drama with Steve McQueen and Natalie Wood. Really great movie. This is just sort of a farcical comedy about a really rich guy who owns a villa in Italy. He only comes there once a year in September, and he hangs out with Gina Lollobrigida when he does. But the folks that take care of the villa have sort of come up with a plan wherein they've made it into a hotel for the rest of the year, so they can have a little extra money, maybe make some improvements, maybe make some money on the side. And for once, he decides to show up in July, and that throws everything off because Gina Lollobrigida's character is like getting married, and so she's going to have to, I don't know, bow out of that or step away from that momentarily. And the whole staff at the villa/hotel has to like tear down all the signs that talking about it being a hotel. They've got like 4 young girls on sort of a spring break trip staying there, and they've got like a house woman that's living there, and that she's sort of like helping keep an eye on them. And so it's very much one of those things where you need to always sort of be thinking about what might offend her. And it's really funny because it becomes sort of a comedy on the level of, she needs to make sure they don't do anything bad. So they've got these 4 girls staying at the villa, and they are being sought after by a group of boys. One of them played by Bobby Darin. One of the girls is Sandra Dee. Bobby Darin would marry Sandra Dee, I want to say like a few weeks after making this movie. That's just an interesting little tidbit. And it becomes a thing where slowly Rock Hudson's character finds out what's going on and sort of takes a approach that is meant to keep an eye on these girls and keep them out of trouble. And so it just becomes this sort of goofy comedy, and Gina Lollobrigida is in on the whole thing, and it's fun. I thought it was a fun movie, and it has a commentary from film historian David Del Val and filmmaker David Dakota, and it's a nice farcical, silly comedy, and I dug this. A little less so. This is the last film from Elvis Presley. This is Change of Habit. It is from 1969. It stars Mary Tyler Moore as one of 3 nuns that, I'll just read the back here. After starring in a string of classic films like Jailhouse Rock, King Creole, Viva Las Vegas, and Clambake, iconic Elvis Presley changed his acting habit and made this unconventional late 60s romance his Hollywood swan song. The King takes on a rare dramatic role as a young, handsome Dr. John Carpenter, who is assigned 3 female social workers to assist him at his inner city clinic. But he doesn't know that they are really nuns. Mary Tyler Moore is Sister Michelle, one of the nuns who takes off her habit and takes off with Elvis's heart. When love blossoms between the sweet singing and swinging doctor and the demure, devoted nun, Michelle must decide whether to follow her heart or to stay true to her vows. So yeah, this one, interesting. It opens with a really interesting scene of him. The 3 nuns take off their outfits. They walk through what looks to be a rough part of the city, and they come to this doctor's office, and he is very, he's sort of blunt with them. He's like, look, this is not a good neighborhood. Women get attacked around here. This is, I don't know if you want to do this. I don't know if you want to come here. And they're like, no, we really do want to volunteer here. And anyway, it goes from there. I actually like some of the songs in this. I thought there was some fun. The title song I liked, and there's one, the second song in the movie, my wife, who's a big Elvis fan, just noticed like it's the same phrase over and over. She's like, are there any other lyrics to this song? And I just, I couldn't disagree, but I nonetheless enjoyed it. But it is always interesting to see the last thing that somebody did, And from that point of view, I think this movie will be remembered. I don't know how readily available this one has been. It may have gotten a DVD and Blu-ray and everything, but for whatever reason, I haven't seen this one out there in the world quite as much. So it's a curiosity for sure. It has an audio commentary by film historians Howard S. Berger and Nathaniel Thompson. And so that's Change of Habit. And then lastly, we have some pre-code films, 4 pre-code films. I'll start with my favorite of this group that I've seen so far, Hot Saturday, that has Cary Grant, Nancy Carroll, and Randolph Scott. And I've heard people say a couple things. One, Cary Grant's persona was, the big myth is that it was sort of his Cary Grant-ishness really was born out of a collaboration between him and another director who did The Awful Truth. And just sort of, they were able to sort of perfect that snarky, funny Cary Grant. And I've heard some people say that Cary Grant is here, and I would have to disagree. I think there is a charismatic Cary Grant here, but he's not the guy that's in The Awful Truth. He's not the guy that's in His Girl Friday. You know, that Cary Grant, that sort of almost cocky, snarky guy is not this guy. The basic idea is it's a small town, and there's a bunch of young people. One of them, Nancy Carroll's character, works at a bank. There's a richer guy from out of town who comes in. He's not married. He has a girl staying with him. The whole town thinks that's way out of line because they're not married. And then a bunch of the kids sort of end up at his house partying. He ends up sort of hitting on Nancy Carroll, but he seems genuinely interested in her. She ends up, through happenstance, sort of staying at his place and getting a ride back from him in the early morning, but they don't do anything. But it ends up sort of really slanting her reputation in town. And so it's sort of that idea of like what's hinted at there and what's indicated by that sleepover bit, you know, and it's a little racy in that sense. But definitely, you know, an enjoyable pre-code. It has an audio commentary by Lee Gambin. Next up we have Devil in the Deep with Charles Laughton and Cary Grant and Tallulah Bankhead, and this one and Gary Cooper. Grant in his first major supporting role for Paramount Studios plays a lieutenant whose commanding officer, Charles Laughton, suspects him of seducing his wife, Bankhead, when the real threat is another officer, Cooper, that being Gary Cooper. This sultry pre-code melodrama serves as a deadly love triangle with a thrilling climax set aboard a submarine that is trapped at the bottom of the sea. Directed by Marion Gehring, Madame Butterfly, and featuring the stunning cinematography of Charles Lang. So this one's intriguing. It has a commentary by David Del Valle again. I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. It's from 1932. Hot Saturday is from 1932 as well. Also from 1931, another Tallulah Bankhead, The Cheat. It says temptation meets its match in The Cheat, a scandalous pre-code classic starring Tallulah Bankhead. And she plays an impulsive and charismatic gambler who has fallen on hard times and owes a large sum of money. A wealthy playboy, Irving Pichel, promises to help her with but his price may be more than Elsa is prepared to give. When her devoted husband takes the fall for her passions, Elsa's loyalties are put to the test. Directed by legendary Broadway Hollywood ace George Abbott during the most decadent era in motion picture history. This daring story explores a woman whose addictions lead her on a path of danger and discovery. Intrigued by this one, had vaguely heard of it, and I'm a fan of Tallulah Bankhead's, but I like that there's just this packet of pre-codes. It could be a small box set, actually. Here is the third one. This is from 1933. This stars, as you can see, Claudette Colbert, looking very flappery on the back there. And this one says, one of the most popular and versatile actresses of her time, Claudette Colbert dazzles audiences in the pre-code musical drama Torch Singer. When Sally Trent Colbert can no longer support her illegitimate child, she puts her daughter up for adoption and pursues a career as a torch singer under the name Mimi Benton. She soon climbs to fame as a sexy nightclub singer and attempts to find her daughter through a children's radio show featuring rare performances of Colbert singing. This emotionally charged classic from directors Alexander Hall and George Sumnes showcases the truly great talent of its star. And this one has a commentary by Kat Ellinger. Ding, ding, ding. Very excited to check this out and listen to Kat's thoughts. But again, really cool to have just a nice little pocket of pre-code films from Kino in the month of October. So that's it for this spotlight. I was hoping for a little bit more horror this month, but nonetheless, a nice group of films. Again, continuing their variety. Kino just really brings a great breadth of films, and I love that. So hopefully there's something of interest for all film lovers in this group, and I will talk to you guys soon. I'm all done. Bye-bye.